thank everybody for coming today. On behalf of Mayor Michael Glazer, the administration, the council, and elected officials today, we welcome you to the 2022 Veterans Day ceremony to honor our veterans in our community, our state, and our country. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge some of the leaders in the community that guide our community on a daily basis and give us some sanctity at home as well as a good quality of life. Kenner City Council, present with us today from District 1, Councilwoman Dee Dunn. Council District 2 is Ronnie Swarth. Council District 3 is Joey Lahat. Councilman from District 4 is Councilman George Brannigan. Councilman from District 5 is Councilman Brian Brennan. Our at-large council persons is Councilwoman Christy McKinney, Councilman Tom Wilmot. We have our Jefferson Parish Councilman for District 4, Dominic Impastato. We have two Justices of the Peace today. We have Justice of the Peace Kevin Santani and Judge Roscoe Lewis. We're also joined by my partner in crime, Constable Jason Ural. And I want to acknowledge the Councilwoman for District 5 in Jefferson Parish, Jennifer Van Rankin. At this time, I'd like to ask everybody to stand for the presentation of colors by the Kenner Police Department Honor Guard. I'd like to ask you to please keep standing as we invite Al Morella, our Kenner resident, Vietnam veteran of the U.S. Navy, to come lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't know if you can hear that in the back. We also want to thank the Marine Forces Reserve Band. I failed to mention them. And also Mr. Claude Dodaro, who's the commissioner of the task force that put this park together. He puts a piece of himself into it every year. As you see all the equipment, he told me he's got some other apparatus that he's planning to come out here. So thank you, Mr. Claude, for all you've done. Now I'd like to ask Pastor Sean Rich of the Vineyard Church to come up here and lead us in an invocation.
Let's bow our heads and pray. God of peace, we pray for those who have served our nation and have laid down their lives to protect and defend our freedom. May we never forget their sacrifice and make right use of our liberty. We pray for those who have been wounded in body and in soul, wounds both visible and invisible, whose nights are haunted by memories too painful for the light of day. And we pray for those who serve us now, especially for those in harm's way. We ask that you shield them from danger and bring them home in safety. Bring peace to those places where women and men have fought and continue to fight. And may you turn the hearts and minds of our leaders and our enemies to the work of justice and a harvest of peace. We pray for all those who are caught up in conflict around the globe this day, civilians and peacekeepers alike, and the poor who have no escape, asking that we have the courage to defend the defenseless. Make room for those who flee for safety and look to that day when we will train for war no more. May the peace you left us, the peace you gave us, be the peace that sustains, the peace that saves us. It is in your name we pray. Amen.
All right, it's my pleasure now to introduce our first speaker, Captain Bruce Little, who's the president of the Special Forces Association, Chapter 30 in Kenner. Captain Lewis was assigned to the A-Team with the 5th Special Forces Group and is currently the president of the Special Forces Association, Chapter 30 here in Kenner. He also served 40 years with the New Orleans Police Department. So without further ado, Captain Bruce Little.
Good morning. Yeah, that means I've been carrying a gun for a living for 46 years. I think I need a new job. It's my honor today to represent the Special Forces Association, Chapter 30, which is covers the southeast region of Louisiana. The association is composed of personnel that served and our Special Forces qualified. We have chapters all over the world in probably 21 different countries. Chapter 30 is unique in that we really focus on serving the veterans community, wounded warriors. We ensure that the Veterans Home and Reserve are visited at least twice a year. We go up there with Deuce and a Halves. We partner with active military. We bring them food, drinks, pets. We do bingos. We try to get them out of that home where, unfortunately, they've basically been forgotten. We visited in December during COVID, or just prior to COVID, and within 2 months, 20% of the veterans home had died from COVID. We continue our support there. In addition, we ensure that any veteran that is to be interred in the Slidell Memorial Cemetery is honored. We provide honor guards for them. Oftentimes these veterans are interred with no family, so we coordinate an honor guard, the Patriot Guard, which are civilians that escort us via motorcycle, and we ensure that that veteran is represented. Just recently, a month and a half ago, there was a local man named Felix Polite. You may have read about him or saw him on the news. The D-Day Museum did an outstanding documentary on this gentleman. He was part of the Devil's Brigade, the 1st Special Service Force. It was the 1st Special Operations Unit in the United States. He's one of a handful of survivors. What was unusual for him was he was somehow forgotten. He was lost off that list of survivors. Every other member was celebrated. They received a gold medal from the president. And not until Mr. Polito's 100th birthday, which was this year, was he finally recognized and presented with that gold medal. One of his last requests was that Special Forces Green Beret personnel performed his honor guard, and we were happy to do so. And this is a local boy. SF has a short but illustrious history based on exploits of the OSS, the Alamo Scouts, Merrill's Marauders, Rangers during World War II. Again, the 1st Special Service Force. They were created in 1952. We are often asked, what's the difference between Green Berets and SEALs, or Rangers, or Marine Force Recon, MARSOC? First off, of course, Special Forces is number one. In actuality, we have different missions. The Rangers, MARSOC, Marine Corps, Navy SEALs are a direct action organization. And what does that mean? They have a mission, they go out, they accomplish that mission. Whether it's a hostage rescue, searching for a high value target, raid, ambush, recon, that's their mission, and they're extremely good at it. Special Forces is quite different. There's no soldier that's James Bond. You can't speak 27 different languages. What the Army did was they selected a cadre of people and created Special Forces. You have to be 3 qualified. You have to volunteer, you have to be airborne qualified, and then you have to go to Special Forces school. My class started with 220, 110 went to the school, and 16 graduated. And the instructor said he only expected 8 to graduate. After graduation, you go to various other schools. What Special Forces focuses on is a force multiplier. You're assigned a region of the world or a country. You must be proficient in that language. You go to language school. If it's mountainous terrain, you go to mountaineering school. If it's snow-covered, you go to ski training. Sometimes you have to parachute in. Sometimes you have to scuba in. Sometimes you walk in. So the training we receive is varied. Your actual mission is to go in and conduct unconventional warfare. You train and equip the indigenous people that have been invaded. De oppressor liber is our motto, and that's to free the oppressed. From Vietnam, Grenada, Haiti, Panama, the Balkans, Desert Storm, Afghanistan and Iraq, Somalia, Africa. Special Forces have been there. In the 70s and 80s, they were deployed in Central America to El Salvador to target left-wing guerrillas, work with DEA targeting narcotic cartels. In 2015, they had deployed to 147 countries that year, and daily, SF personnel are in 70 to 90 countries at any given time. Who are they? Average team member is mid-30s. You have an officer. You have a warrant officer who came up through the ranks. That's a team leader, assistant team leader. And you have 10 non-commissioned personnel. Each one of those personnel is an expert at what he does. And then you are required to do a secondary job, a secondary MOS. You have 2 communications sergeants, 2 medical sergeants, 2 weapons sergeants, 1 heavy, 1 light weapons. An intelligence sergeant. You have a team leader. You have 2 demolition combat engineers. They do this capability for a number of reasons. If that 12-man A-team has to be split in 2, each of those officers can take that 6-man team and Charlie Mike continue the mission. If one of your members is killed or injured, everyone is cross-trained in every one of those capabilities. Just something I wanted every guy up here to discuss a little something personal about their lives. I had two mission-specific details I was assigned to. Very few people know, but before Delta Force, there was a project called Project Blue Light. The commander of 5th Special Forces Group was tasked with providing the first anti-terrorist unit until Colonel Charles Beckwith could stand up Delta. I was assigned there as a sniper, but as soon as Delta Force came to fruition, they disbanded Blue Light. A much lesser known organization was called Project Green Light. It's now declassified because an unnamed colonel didn't realize it was classified and somehow leaked it to the media. Special Forces had the capability, and I was on one of these teams, the Green Light team, where we actually carried nuclear backpacks. You had a man-portable nuclear device. This is during the Cold War. And our mission was, if Russia invaded the surrounding countries, your mission was to go in and deploy that tactical nuke, destroy a larger bridge or a strategic target. Many of us knew that you may get out of the kill zone and you may not, but that was a very little known unit in the in Special Forces. I'd like to introduce three of the members of Chapter 30. Bob Romero to the right. The illustrious Jack Vincent. And the esteemed John Person. And if you don't mind, I'd like them to come up to speak a few words about what they did. Probably 97% of our membership are all Vietnam vets, some Korean, some Vietnam vets. I believe SF was awarded 21 Medals of Honor during Vietnam. So I'm in extremely good company. I appreciate your time. I hope that cleared up some questions about who the best special ops unit is. With all due respect to the Colonel. Bob?
Morning. I'd like to think that both of my knees are never going to need to have titanium in them. I'm from Lafayette. I moved here when I retired. And being from Lafayette, I guess you can tell I'm probably the only guy here with no accent. I appreciate that. I was in the Army Special Forces at Fort Bragg in the late 60s. I recall this being somewhere around perhaps November. And my tour at Fort Bragg was very interesting because during the late October, I think it was, the Arab-Israeli Six-Day War took place. We were there. And America being a melting pot, we had both Arabs and Israelis in the U.S. Army. It made for interesting boot-shining time in the barracks. Name-calling was already common. Just walking by somebody's bunk, you'd get addressed by something you wouldn't want to say at home. But that made it very tense because we are the kind of country that we are. We had Arabs and Israelis here. Further, in that same year, the United States had a warship that was seized in near North Korea. It was called the USS Pueblo. You may remember it. The Pueblo had 199 crew members. Our detachment at Fort Bragg was put on alert. And when that happens with Special Forces, you go in, and it's done a little differently today. You know, I'm not a brown boot soldier, but I'm pretty far back. So in 1968, we went into isolation. And isolation completely stops you from the world. You get nothing. You know, as a 20-year-old, we didn't read the newspaper anyway. So when you'd go home on Christmas Eve, it was not uncommon to be spit upon and called a baby killer. We didn't know what Walter Cronkite was saying. We didn't watch the news. We were shining boots and criticizing Arabs and Israelis. So what happened is when the Pueblo was seized, we were put in isolation to cordon you off away from all of that kind of outside influence. And then you start focusing on the mission, the language, what you're going to need for medical supplies, where are you going to land. The mission's been declassified, as Bruce would say, but our plan was we were going to be airdropped by parachute into North Korea. There's a little peninsula that juts out, and the POW camp was about, I seem to recall, maybe 12 kilometers from the sea, and then we were going to be airdropped in about 8 kilometers above that, and the only drop zone was this cleared away cross of the hills where power lines go. It would have been a very tough mission, and it was scrubbed at the last minute. I don't think the president wanted to take that chance. But the mission was interesting because we were to go down, take the POWs, take the camp, take the POWs, not take any prisoners, and march down to the sea where we were going to be evacuated from the Korean Peninsula by submarines. That kind of freaked me out. I thought the inside of an airplane was kind of small, but a submarine, if you've been in one, man, that's a freak out. And we were going to be picked up off the beach and brought to the submarines by a fairly new group of soldiers, if you would, called Navy SEALs. Navy SEALs were fairly new in '68. So that mission was scrubbed, but hardly anybody knew about it. It happened on a Sunday night. I called home, and my wife says, "Oh my God," this was a Friday. It was a payphone. We were being monitored. And my wife says, "Oh my God, did you hear what happened this morning?" And I said, "No, what happened?" She said, "Well, a fishing vessel was seized by the Koreans. You know, they had no right to take a fishing vessel." Well, at that level, we were all cleared for secrets. The mission was top secret. So kind of give you some idea of what Special Forces does. The mission was canceled, and I'm here today very likely because of that. I say that there are 19 airplanes in the U.S. Air Force that have my fingernail scratches on the door all the way out into the sky. It's not, you know, you do it automatically. You do it as a soldier. You do it as a SEAL. You do it as a Marine. You are so trained, so disciplined that you're ready to go. In Special Forces, your mission is to free the oppressed. We do things a little bit differently. We learn how to do a lot of other weapons. We learn how to do a lot of things that are unconventional. Nonetheless, that would have been my mission. Would have been the Pueblo. But that's a little bit about me. Kid born while I was in the Army, getting called names by people coming through the Atlanta airport on my way to Lafayette. And they had a funny accent too, by the way. So anyway, thank you all for being here. I want to say I've been coming to the Kenner Veterans Day and Memorial Day celebrations for 10 years, and I first got invited here by a former veteran who said, "They have chili with their hot dogs." Let's hear it for Kenner, right? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jack Vincent, and Bruce introduced me as the illustrious, but looking out in the crowd here, I see a lot of heroes, a lot of veterans, and I also want to include in that number the police and fire. Now, Bruce told me to tell my story, make it a little personal, and try and keep it funny. So how did a boy from the Irish Channel wind up being a Green Beret? As a 21-year-old senior in college, I went and enlisted in the Special Forces. After taking the physical exam and the written exam and passing those, I was sworn in. And this might tell you something about my experience. I was sworn into the Army on April Fool's Day, 1969. While still in college, I was engaged to be married. But my father-in-law said, "You're not going to get married until you graduate, or else I'm not going to pay for my daughter's tuition." Being a poor boy from the Irish Channel, We graduated one weekend and got married the next weekend, right? My orders were supposed to come in about 6 months. So I went out, got a job on the river as a towboat deckhand. About 3 weeks later, I got those orders. So off I went in July of 1969 to Fort Bliss, Texas for basic training. Just happened to hit a stretch of the hottest weather ever out there, 40 days in a row of over 100 degrees. And when we went to training at White Sands, New Mexico, where all the field training was done, it was over 120 degrees. Now, to this day, I swear to you, the only reason why I got a marksman badge with the M14 and not sharpshooter was that the 500-yard targets were wavering like this. And you just figured out where's the center, and you shot for the middle of the mirage to get it. After basic training, I wound up at a little-known base that probably none of you have heard of for my advanced training, which happened to be Fort Huachuca, Arizona. I had to look up, where the heck is this place? South of Tucson, next to a small city called Sierra Vista, right on the Mexican border. Its claim to fame, two of them. One, it served as a training area for the all-black divisions in the Army in World War II. And prior to that, it was the base from which General Blackjack Pershing launched his attack into Mexico on Pancho Villa. Then it was on to jump school in January of 1970. Again, one of the coldest stretches of weather in Georgia at that time. After completing airborne training and the obligatory 5 jumps, I went directly, no delay, into Special Forces training. 2 days after arriving at Fort Bragg, we were placed in the field in the first phase of Special Forces training, and it was 28 days. And let me tell you that North Carolina might be a southern state, but when they put you in the field in February for 28 days, it's cold. It was so cold that even the water buffaloes that had the water we would draw from were frozen. We did not take a bath for 28 days. When we returned back to base, we looked like the grossest people you'd ever want to see. It was almost like that cartoon where flies are buzzing around a cartoon character. Nobody wanted to get near us. Most of us burned those uniforms. We pretty much kept one uniform on for the 28 days. Then there was a period of classroom instruction, secret briefings, and specialized training. And then finally moving on to the last phase of training in a mythical new republic created in western North Carolina called the People's Republic of Pineland. And there we were to link up with civilians who would participate in the exercises. They were our guerrillas that we had to train and do missions with. The whole time we were being sought after by long-range reconnaissance patrol groups out of the 82nd Airborne. They were doing air surveillance trying to find our 12-man A-teams. And sometimes the very people we were working with would turn on us and turn us in. Or we would get captured by the patrols out looking for us. If that happened, and I didn't want that to happen, during that 2-week period, I slept in my uniform with my rifle in my sleeping bag and my boots on. No one was going to catch me because you went to prison camp. And at prison camp, they took your clothes off, they did interrogation, and yes, folks, we got tortured. If you were that lucky, you might wind up getting waterboarded with a physician present. Later, this part of the training was moved into a program called SEER, Survival, Escape, Resistance, and Evasion. But we probably went through the very preliminary parts of that before it was formalized. Then in May of 1970, I was fortunate enough to earned the Green Beret with my flash on it, which was our unit patch, and was returned back to my unit and put on an A-team. Bruce told you about our specializations. Mine happened to be communications, and then I had my secondary MOS as operations and intelligence. Our team had two communications sergeants, and we had a radio that was invented for behind the lines operations. It consisted of about four pieces of equipment, a hand crank generator, and an aluminum seat that you would open up, so you would have to crank the generator and the other operator would be keying the set. That piece of equipment alone was 90 pounds. The two sergeants split that equipment up. Now you can tell I'm not a pretty big guy. So me getting 45 pounds of that before I got everything else I had to carry put quite a load on us. As I progressed through the unit, we went to different specialized training. I wound up going to mountain climbing training at Camp Hale, Colorado, and we were trained there by the Kit Carson Scouts stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado. And I actually wound up meeting the instructor who had gone to jump school with me, who was then with the Kit Carson Scouts, so it was something of a renewal of friendship. Another one of the training activities that I went to was jungle training in Puerto Rico. In fact, my first trip to Puerto Rico, I arrived at 12 o'clock midnight, parachuting in from a C-141 jet aircraft. Into the El Yunque rainforest we went, again, linking up with local people who were acting as guerrillas while the Puerto Rican National Guard was out hunting for us. We were doing different missions and moving forward. The next specialized training I went to happened to be jump school. And that was probably one of the most detailed training programs I went to in the military, because when you're the jump master, the people that you're watching parachute out of that aircraft, their lives are in your hands. You have to inspect every jumper before he gets on that plane to make sure there's no malfunction in his chute. You have to hang out the plane, look for the marker on the ground. As the plane approaches, you watch the marker. When it hits at the right angle, you start putting them in the door, and out they go, one right after the other. Since our teams were quite small, of 12 people, we were often placed on very small drop zones that we were over very quickly, out and on the ground very quickly. Most of those jumps were conducted at 1,250 feet, but in combat they can be done as low as 800 to 650 feet, and most of the time when that's done, they don't even wear a reserve parachute. It either opens or it doesn't. My last assignment in a Special Forces A-team, I became the Operations and Intelligence Sergeant. Essentially, I was in charge of all the enlisted people below me, and I reported up to the two officers who were in charge of that unit. And when I left as a Staff Sergeant E6. I'm very proud of that rank. I made it more or less in record time. And it was a great adventure for me. And I guess looking back on it now, I got paid to do adventure sports. So I thank all of you for your service and your time here today. Thanks so much.
Good morning. I'm John Person. Most of you know me as King Argus. I'm a local boy. I'm also one of the oldest people here, other than me and Claude, probably. Quickly, I was a senior in 1962 at Holy Cross and had lots of dreams of LSU, lots of dreams of other things. It was a time long ago that some of you don't even remember, obviously. But the President of the United States was John F. Kennedy. And he was pretty special to most people at that time and since. So we went on through graduation. Somewhere along the line, I met a Green Beret. I had never heard of a Green Beret or a Special Forces guy. Had a very big impression on me. It was a friend of a brother of a friend. At LSU, I was into Persian rifles. Once again, always gung-ho. Basically, while I was at LSU, some of you may remember, President Kennedy got killed. The death of John F. Kennedy affected a lot of us somewhat like 9/11 did. It was a turning point in many lives. Remember one other thing, if you don't know. This is before Vietnam. There was no Vietnam War. There might have been some different people in different places, but the war hadn't been declared. In my senior year, I broke up with a girl. She broke up with me. And I decided, I'm gonna do something different. So I went out and talked to the local recruiters, talked to Special Forces. As well as I didn't excel in school, I was always pretty intelligent, and I tested very high, and they recruited me. And so I went into Special Forces. Right after that, there was the Gulf of Tonkin incidents, some of you may remember, where the Vietnamese government attacked a ship over there, one of our ships. And that was really when it kicked off the war. Just to bring you up to date, I just want to mention the fact that Chapter 30 sponsors a float every year in the crew of Argus. And we bring in active duty military and veterans to ride. And we probably have been doing that since 9/11. The first year that we did that, I was looking at some pictures recently. I had already been King of Argus, and I was the one that made the presentation that day. Some of these fellows participated. I didn't know until years later that about 4 of the guys that were in our group being treated to a ride and to R&R were actual people that were members of the original 12 Strong that you've seen in the movies. But they were humble, and they didn't tell us that. And it's only recently that I've been aware of who they are. Wanted you to know about Argus, wanted you to know about the rod. Kenner has been an unbelievable host to us through the years, through many administrations. The admins like yourselves, the support, have always given support to our effort to honor the military. It is quite a thrill on Mardi Gras Day to go out on Veterans Boulevard in front of 1 million people, and they're chanting at our float, USA, USA. And we're going to continue to do that and then invite you to come out and see us. And again, Chapter 30 sponsors that float. Thank you.
Thank you. And those are some inspiring stories. As a father of 4, I got trouble having my kids take the garbage out. And these people are parachuting behind enemy lines and doing heroic things. So thank you for those stories. That makes this day that much more special. Our next special speaker is Colonel George Markett, U.S. Marine, Chief of Staff, 4th Marine Logistics Group, Marine Forces Reserve. Colonel Markett is originally from Virginia Beach, Virginia. He graduated from Virginia Tech and was commissioned as second lieutenant in December 1993. His bio is in your program. It's very impressive. Colonel?
Ladies and gentlemen, honored and distinguished guests, our veterans and those currently serving, good morning and happy Veterans Day. Thank you for attending this event here on this beautiful day. It is an honor and a privilege to be among you and to address this crowd on such an important occasion. I'm especially delighted to be speaking in front of the proud citizens of the great state of Louisiana, as well as the city of Kenner, New Orleans, and its surrounding communities. Your overwhelming support for our military and our nation is evident everywhere I go. And the deeply profound and distinctly positive influence our veterans have across this area is absolutely unmistakable. It is difficult to put into words and to sum up what the people gathered here have done and continue to do for our great nation. We have veterans in attendance who have fought in every conceivable conflict for the past 70 years. Following these heroic achievements, our veterans continue to lead and contribute in meaningful ways in every conceivable manner. Up front, I sincerely thank you all for your service, your sacrifices, and your courage. But that is why we are gathered here today, and that is to highlight the collective service, sacrifice, and courage of our veterans and all of us who support us. It is this notion of unselfishness and love of country that brings us to this moment when we answer the nation's call, to be most ready when the nation is least ready. It is this almost mythical desire to stand up to a challenge that has existed among Americans since our nation's birth. From the War for American Independence, all the way to this very moment, to right now. All of you are an extension of the extraordinary men and women who embarked upon the impossible task of creating and forming the greatest nation in the history of the planet Earth. You have all stood up to tyranny and evil, faced grave danger, overcome seemingly immovable obstacles, and countered threats to our collective life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You have successfully defended freedom. Trust me when I say this, without you, there would be no United States of America. But we know that freedom is not free and is always in a fragile state of being. It must be defended by those strong men and women who call themselves warriors, who put country before self, who volunteer to take on the world's greatest challenges, and who live extraordinary lives, like you just heard up here a few minutes ago. These men and women seek not glory nor recognition, but the intrinsic value associated with performing an honorable deed, with knowing that they made a difference and along the way became a part of history. To be among such noble men and women today compels me to finally reflect on my own childhood. For the first 4 decades of my life, I was fortunate to spend significant time with my grandfather. He was a naval aviator during World War II and the Korean War. He saw things and told stories that many people today likely would not believe. His experiences and contributions to this world seem outsized and disproportionate when compared to most other people that I know. His son, my father, also served the United States Navy for 29 years, doing a year-long tour on patrol boats on the Qua Viet River in Vietnam, and a tour aboard the aircraft carrier John F. Kennedy in Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm. His experiences also seemed larger than life, and he constantly set the example for me when it came to honor, courage, and commitment. It was this environment within which I grew up that eventually compelled me to serve my country in my own unique way as a United States Marine. The three of us not only share a name, but also a legacy. And like all of you, we have placed service to country and sacrifice for the greater good in the form of military service above all other obligations. And we recognize these actions as the highest of moral virtues. In my family, there are many other veterans from all 4 services plus the Coast Guard, many of whom went on to further public service and continue to distinguish themselves in highly demanding environments all over the country. They represent the heart and soul of America. And the story of my family is certainly much like the story of all of yours. It is this same sense of duty and devotion to a cause that has characterized my family for the past century that has been instilled and nurtured in this veteran community here today. This sense of fellowship, kinship, brotherhood, and shared hardship that we know all too well is quite evident here today and is a major force that shapes our society, often communicated from one generation to the next via myths, stories, and legends. It is this aggregate group of people that provides the foundation for American greatness. You who are in attendance today are the keys to American strength and the success of our nation. You possess the will to achieve excellence, to set the example for all others to follow, to maintain a sense of purpose in a world where it is often sorely lacking. The purpose to lead, serve, and inspire others. People from all walks of life who serve as the glue that holds communities together. When I look at this audience, I don't just see veterans and families. I see people who call themselves patriots, citizens, leaders, neighbors, and friends. I see people who are loyal, honest, hardworking, genuine, and unselfish. I see everything that is good in this world, and I see the highest standards of integrity and moral virtue. Please don't ever forget how important you are to the survival of this nation and all that it represents. I am humbled to be in your presence today. On solemn occasions such as this, we Marines say Semper Fidelis, which means always faithful. Faithful to our country and to each other. In that spirit, we will move forward together to achieve greatness. And I wish you fair winds and following seas along your journey. And I thank you for all that you have done. God bless all of you, and God bless America.
All right, thank you, Colonel. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Art Tadella. Mr. Art is a citizen of Kenner. He's very active in the community, and he's a Vietnam veteran. I'd like for him to come up and address the crowd.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor, council members, my fellow veterans, and ladies and gentlemen. On November 13th, 1982, the Vietnam War Memorial was dedicated, better known as the Wall. It was dedicated to open to the public for the first time. It's now been 40 years since that day. The wall has 58,258 names on the wall. They represent all the armed forces. There are 827 names from Jefferson Parish. 47 of those names are right here in Jefferson Parish. That's the most for any parish during the Vietnam War that are on the wall. 7 names are from the city of Kenner. To my left is the plaque when we had the Vietnam War replica here. In May 2024, it'll be 10 years that the wall was here. I hope to bring back the wall in 2024 because it's 10 years. With the support of the mayor, we can do this. And I thank the mayor's staff for inviting me to speak here today. It was a great opportunity to hear these stories. Thank you so much. And like my fellow Marine behind me, Semper Fi. Thank you. God bless America.
Thank you, Mr. Tedelo. I do remember that wall was here. It was a pretty moving experience. It was around the clock, and they had lines waiting to visit that wall. This is a special part of the program. It's we're going to invite the Marine Forces Reserve Band to play the Armed Forces medley. We would ask that any veteran that is here today that can stand when they hear their branch's anthem played, that they would do so and be recognized. So with that, the Marine Forces Reserve Band. Thank you. It seemed like you played one of those anthems a little louder and crisper than the other ones, but I understand. I'm just kidding. Right now I'd like to invite the members of VFW Post 7732 to lay the commemorative wreath at the memorial plaque here in Veterans Park. Again, the band will play taps for the solemn event. You know, on Veterans Day, we not only respect the living that served, but also the ones that have given their life and the ultimate sacrifice for us. And that's what this part of the ceremony is for. So, community leaders, if y'all like to go, accompany VFW Post, council members. Also, yes, y'all can accompany. Thank you for that. Now, I'd like to ask Mr. Al Morella to step up. Council President Christy McKinney is going to come up and have 3 proclamations that she's going to read for some of our veterans. Ms. McKinney.
Yes, I'd also like to invite Mr. Frederick Hudson Miller to join us as well. The first one is actually going to go to you, Mr. Miller. Whereas Frederick Hudson Miller joined the Naval Reserve in 1970 in Orlando, spent time on a total of 8 different reserve units, and served in Vietnam and several other countries. Whereas Frederick has a total of 40 years of military service in 3 branches of government, including 26 years in the U.S. Navy, 11 years in the Army Reserve, and 3 years in the Louisiana National Guard. Whereas Frederick earned a number of awards and medals, including Army and Navy Achievement, Army Service with the Gold Braid, Overseas Service, Sea Service, Pistol Expert, Rifle Expert, Humanitarian Service, and Legion of Merit. Whereas Frederick and his wife, Susan Ball, have been married for 52 years and have 2 sons, a daughter, and 4 granddaughters. They have lived in Kenner for 47 years. Whereas Frederick worked at Avondale Shipyard for 40 years, with his last position as leading foreman. He was a Boy Scout leader, served on the board for the Kenner Naval Museum for 12 years, and has been a member of the VFW Post 7732 for 11 years. Now, therefore, I, Kenner Acting Mayor, or Kenner Mayor Mike Glazer, along with members of the Kenner City Council and Chief of Police Keith Conley, do hereby congratulate and thank Frederick Miller for his military service to our country.
I'd like to thank the City Council for this proclamation, and also a lot of respect for you gentlemen back here. Y'all did way more than I thought I'd ever do. But this is really good, and I appreciate this award, but I think it goes to a lot of other veterans too that need it. They served as well as I did, plus the unforgotten heroes, the wives of the family members who stood at home worrying about their husbands. Some of them even had children in the service too at the same time, and were worrying about them, and they had to take care of the house, run the family, and we're off playing Army, you know? So they just had to step up and do everything with nobody around to help them. So my congratulations to all of them. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. We have 2 more, and Mr. Morello will be accepting them on their behalf. The first one goes to Mr. Joseph Nakan. Joseph Nakan joined the U.S. Navy in 1965 and proudly served the country for 4 years, including a year in Da Nang, Vietnam, and nearly 2 years aboard the USS Hyman from 1967 to 1969. Whereas Joseph received both the Vietnam Campaign and National Defense Service medals for his military achievements, and is a lifetime member of the VFW Post 7732 and a former member of the American Legion Post 350. Whereas Joseph has lived in Harahan, Kenner, and Metairie, and he and his wife of 53 years, Billy, have 4 children: Joseph M. Nakan Jr., Melissa Nakan, Katina N. Richards, and Angela N. Scully, as well as 6 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. Whereas Joseph, who has 5 sisters and 3 brothers and recently celebrated his 75th birthday, is retired from the International Matex Tank Terminal. Now, therefore, I, Kenner Mayor Mike Glazer, along with the members of the Kenner City Council and Chief of Police Keith Conley, do hereby congratulate and thank Mr. Nakan for his military service.
I'm honored to receive this proclamation on behalf of Joe Naquan and his family and VFW Post 7732. Thank you very much, Mayor Michael Glazer, Acting Mayor Christy McKinney, for this job well done. I want to thank the staff of the administration first and foremost, and everyone who was involved in making this possible.
Thank you, Mr. Morello. And he'll also be accepting it on behalf of Mr. Michael Young. Whereas Michael L. Young, who passed away in July, shortly after celebrating his 75th birthday, proudly served in the U.S. Navy from 1966 to 1970 in Vietnam. Whereas Michael was awarded the National Defense Service Medal, the Vietnam Campaign Medal, and the Vietnam Service Medal, he was a member of VFW Post 7732. Whereas Michael, who lived in Kenner for 40 years, was married to Barbara Young for 30 years, and they had a daughter, Erica Young. He retired from the Board of Commissioners for the Port of New Orleans. Now, therefore, Kenner Mayor Mike Glazer, along with the members of the Kenner City Council and Chief of Police Keith Conley, do posthumously congratulate and thank Michael Young for his service to our country.
Once again, it's an honor to accept this proclamation on behalf of the Young family. Mr. Michael Young is no longer with us, but he's smiling down from heaven, and he's just as proud as can be. And once again, I want to thank the administration, first and foremost, their staff, for making this possible. And I do have some more to say, too. Can I? Okay. Now, while I'm up here, I want to recite a poem that was written by John McCrae on May 3rd, 1915, after witnessing his best friend and fellow soldier killed in a place called Flanders Field in Belgium, France. And this is what inspired the poem. After these heroes were buried, the first thing that grew in that field was the red poppy. That the VFW was the first veterans organization to distribute them. And in 1922, that was, we just marked a milestone of 100 years. In 1923, we called it the Buddy Poppy because it's made by disabled veterans and needy veterans. In 1924, it was registered with the Patent Office as the Buddy Poppy. The poem goes something like this. In Flanders Field, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. The larks up in the sky still bravely singing. Fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt the dawn, saw the sunset glow, loved and were loved. Now we lie in Flanders Field. Carry out our quarrel with the foe. To you, with failed hands, we throw the torch to be yours to be held high. If ye break the faith of us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Field. God bless the United States of America. God bless all of our veterans. Welcome home to all of our veterans. The greatest country in the world always will be and will always be the freest country in the world, no matter what. Thank you very much.
All right, for you guests, you have been kinderized with Mr. Al Morello, so thank him for his words. He asked me if he could say something. I said, can I stop you? So, but thank you for that. Again, this brings a conclusion to the ceremony. I want to thank Mayor Mike Glazer, his staff, his administration for putting this on. This is something I think we all look forward to, but on this day that we observe Veterans Day, remember that we have veterans within our community. Under the fire department, police department administration, we visit some of the assisted living facilities, and inside those facilities there's a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of stories, and little nuggets of history that we enjoy. So if you have time, visit your veterans in the community. Let's remember them all year, not just on Veterans Day. Thank y'all for coming, and have a blessed day.